The arrival at Nova Academy. Mira Johnson stood at the massive entrance to Nova Academy, feeling a surge of excitement and trepidation. The immense gates of the academy were imposing, crafted from a metallic material that shimmered with an ethereal glow, almost as though the gates themselves were alive, reacting to the presence of the newcomers. As she adjusted the strap of her small, worn-out travel bag, she glanced up at the towering structure ahead. It looked less like a building and more like a monument to the unknown, a place where futures were shaped and destinies were rewritten. But today, it was a place that would decide hers. The hum of an approaching hovercraft brought her back to reality. The transport pilot, a tall being with translucent skin that rippled with faint patterns of color, hovered nearby. He gave her a curious look, perhaps wondering how she, a human, had managed to remain so composed. "Are you sure you're ready?" His voice was calm, but Mira could detect the undertone of hesitation. Mira smiled, giving him a look that carried the quiet confidence of someone who had trained their entire life for this moment. "Yes, I'm ready." The pilot blinked in surprise. Most humans, most of your kind, that is, would be terrified to step foot in a place like this. A school filled with thousands of species from across the galaxy. It's unprecedented that they even allowed one human to enroll. He shook his head slowly, as if still unable to comprehend it. Mira straightened up. Maybe that's the problem. No one believes we can be more than they think. But that's going to change. She spoke softly, almost to herself, her voice full of determination. With a low hum, the massive doors of the academy slowly parted, revealing a vast interior bathed in the soft glow of shimmering lights and towering spires. The floor was alive with activity. Students of all shapes, sizes, and forms moved around, attending to their business. Some walked on two legs, others slithered across the ground, and some even hovered mid-air, their wings or energy fields propelling them forward. There were beings with tentacles, some with multiple heads, and others with entirely unfamiliar features. It was a mesmerizing spectacle, one that left Mira momentarily speechless. As she stepped inside, the rush of voices, languages, and the intoxicating mix of unfamiliar smells bombarded her senses. The sense of spices, strange chemicals, and unfamiliar flowers filled the air. The sound of hundreds of conversations in a dozen languages reverberated off the walls. Some of the alien students turned to look at her as she passed by. The whispering started almost immediately. "Did you see that? A human. Here. In the Galactic Academy." One muttered in a language Mira couldn't understand, though her translator made it crystal clear. "I thought they were too primitive to join us." Mira simply walked past them, her eyes forward, ignoring their comments and focusing on what lay ahead. She had a mission, and she wouldn't let the murmurs of doubt and prejudice throw her off course. The human race had been underestimated for centuries, but Mira wasn't here to prove anyone wrong. She was here to show them exactly what humanity could do. Her first stop was the welcome desk, where a being with 4 arms, long purple tentacles, and shimmering blue skin waited. The being's 4 eyes blinked in perfect unison, a sign of respect, before it addressed her. "Human," the being asked, confirming her identity. "Mira Johnson, Earth," she said confidently. "I'm here to start my studies." The being nodded, its tone neutral. "You will meet with Administrator Zorik before proceeding to your dormitory. He has requested to speak with you directly." Mira was led down a long, winding hallway, the walls adorned with strange symbols and images from across the universe. As she walked, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Each step seemed to bring her closer to something monumental. She was walking in the footsteps of the greatest minds and warriors the galaxy had ever seen. She, a simple human girl, was now a part of that history. The door to Administrator Zorik's office opened with a soft hiss, and Mira stepped inside. Zorik, a towering figure with golden skin and an intricate pattern of ridges running down his face, stood behind a massive desk that seemed almost too small for his frame. His eyes studied her with intensity, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to Nova Academy, Mira Johnson," Zorik said, his voice deep and commanding. "You're aware that your presence here is highly unusual, yes?" Mira nodded. "Yes, but I'm here to prove that humans belong just as much as any other species." Zorik's gaze softened for a moment before returning to its scrutinizing intensity. "You represent more than just yourself. Your success here will determine whether other humans will be allowed to join the Federation. We will be watching closely, Mira." The weight of his words sank in, and Mira felt her resolve harden. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for humanity's place in the universe. "We believe you have the potential," Zorik continued. "But this academy operates at a level far beyond Earth's education system. Your performance will be assessed rigorously. Do not disappoint us." "I won't," Mira said firmly. "I'll prove that humanity can not only keep up with you all, but surpass you." Zorik studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Very well. Your dormitory is already assigned. You will meet your roommate, a student named Talia. She is from the planet Zoreth. Proceed there immediately and prepare yourself for tomorrow's physical assessment. You will need to be at your best." "Thank you," Mira said, her voice steady. She turned and exited the room, her mind already racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. As Mira walked through the labyrinthine corridors of Nova Academy, she felt a strange sense of isolation. She was surrounded by thousands of students, each from a different species, each with their own culture, abilities, and histories. And yet, in this vast galaxy, she was the only human. But Mira knew that if she wanted to prove herself, she couldn't let that isolation define her. She arrived at her dorm room and stepped inside, where her new roommate, a tall reptilian creature with green scales and large, amber eyes, was already unpacking her belongings. The creature glanced up as Mira entered, studying her with a mix of curiosity and wariness. "You must be Mira," the creature said in a smooth, melodic voice. "I'm Talia. Welcome." "Thanks," Mira replied, smiling slightly. "I guess this will be home for a while." Talia nodded, turning back to her packing. "It's strange, having a human in the academy. I'm sure you know that." Mira's smile faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I know, but I'm here to prove that humans are capable of more than anyone expects." Talia's eyes gleamed with something, curiosity, perhaps, or maybe doubt. But there was something about her that Mira couldn't quite place. "Well, we'll see how it goes," Talia said softly, her voice carrying an unspoken challenge. Mira unpacked her few belongings, simple clothes, a couple of books, and a small device that she kept hidden at the bottom of her bag. It was a communication device, used only for the most secure of messages, one that Earth's government had provided her with for this mission. It wasn't meant for anyone else to know about. Not yet, anyway. As she unpacked, she couldn't help but think of the mission ahead. She had been sent here to represent Earth, to show the Federation that humans weren't weak or primitive. But what if there was something more at play? What if Earth's fears were justified, and there were darker forces within the Federation working against them? The next day, Mira's first test came, the physical assessment. She had trained for this moment her entire life, and it was finally time to prove that humanity could stand among the stars. The moment she entered the assessment arena, she knew this wasn't going to be easy. The room was filled with alien students, each one different from the last. Some taller, some shorter, some with scales, others with wings. The instructor, a tall alien with 6 limbs and a sharp, angular face, watched them all carefully. "Your first test is reaction time," the instructor announced in a language Mira had never heard before. Fortunately, her translator kicked in just in time. Mira stepped forward, her heart pounding with anticipation. The lights began to flash, one by one, and she knew this would be the first of many tests to come. She had trained for years to be faster, stronger, and more adaptable than any human before her. But would it be enough to impress these alien students? She wasn't just representing herself. She was representing all of humanity. And she would not fail. The unfamiliar classroom. Mira had barely caught her breath from the physical assessment when she was sent to her first class, a lecture hall filled with rows of holographic displays and a large floating podium where the instructor, a slender being with multiple eyes, stood waiting. She scanned the room, noticing how each student, regardless of their species, appeared calm and focused, some quietly chatting amongst themselves while others flipped through digital tablets, clearly preparing for the lesson ahead. As Mira took a seat in one of the back rows, the air in the room seemed to hum with an energy she had never felt before. The students around her were speaking in various alien tongues, their words fluid and melodic, each with their own distinct cadence. She could feel the weight of their gazes on her, but she was determined to remain composed. When the professor, a multi-limbed creature with translucent skin and shimmering scales, began the class, the atmosphere shifted instantly. His voice echoed through the room, amplified by the technology surrounding them. He spoke of xenobiology, studying the biological systems of the many species within the Galactic Federation. Mira had studied biology back on Earth, but she knew this would be a far more challenging curriculum. Today's lesson, the instructor said, his voice resonating with the strange musical tones of his species, will focus on the digestive systems of the Ithar species. Pay close attention. Their physiology is vastly different from anything you will encounter on Earth, or indeed, in most Federation worlds. Mira listened intently, absorbing every detail. The Ithar species, it turned out, had a digestive system that utilized both chemical digestion and absorption through specialized tentacles that extended from their bodies. Their biology was complex, so much so that Mira found herself fascinated. Her curiosity piqued. She had always been a quick learner, and here, in this classroom full of beings from 1,000 different worlds, she realized just how much Earth still had to learn about the universe. The professor's lecture was accompanied by a 3D holographic display showing a detailed, rotating model of the Ithar's digestive system. Each of their organs was represented in translucent blue, pulsing with energy. Mira marveled at how detailed the technology was, how seamlessly it blended with the instructor's voice, and how it made complex concepts so accessible. When the professor turned his attention to the class, asking for volunteers to answer questions, Mira raised her hand without hesitation. She could feel the curious eyes of her classmates on her, their attention shifting from the hologram to her. She had become used to it by now, the scrutiny, the whispers, but she didn't flinch. She had a purpose here, and her knowledge would be her strength. "Yes, human student," the professor said, his tone respectful but inquisitive. "You have a question?" Mira nodded, her eyes never leaving the holographic model. If the Ithar can digest certain compounds through their tentacles, how do they process nutrients when traveling between star systems, where resources are scarce? The professor paused, clearly impressed by her insight. He flicked his wrist, and the hologram changed, zooming in on the Ithar's intricate neural pathways. Excellent question. The Ithar have evolved a symbiotic relationship with a specific kind of space algae that grows in the lower atmospheres of certain planets. This algae, when consumed, allows them to store nutrients and energy for long periods of time. Their metabolism is slower during these periods, but they can survive for months without needing a substantial food source. Mira smiled inwardly. She had read about the Ithar in her textbooks, but hearing the details from an expert brought the information to life in a way she had never experienced before. It was a reminder of why she had come to this academy in the first place: to learn, to grow, and to show the Federation that humans were capable of more than just surviving in this vast galaxy. They could thrive too. The rest of the class proceeded without incident, but as the bell rang signaling the end of the session, Mira couldn't shake the sense that something was off. The students around her packed up their tablets and equipment, but there was a quiet tension in the air, a subtle undercurrent of curiosity that made her feel like an outsider all over again. As she left the lecture hall, Mira was approached by a group of students who seemed eager to talk to her. One of them, a tall, elegant being with violet skin and long flowing tendrils, stepped forward. "You're Mira, right?" the student asked, his voice smooth and musical. "I've heard about you. You're the human who survived the physical assessment and fought in the tournament. Impressive." Mira raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. "I just did what I had to do." The student smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I'm Eris from the planet Vela. I'm a second-year student here. If you're interested, I can show you around the campus. There's a lot to see, and most of us would be happy to help you. Settle in." Mira hesitated. She had been so focused on her mission that she hadn't thought much about making friends, but maybe now was the time to let her guard down, just a little. She was surrounded by beings from all over the galaxy, and she couldn't afford to alienate herself. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I'm still getting used to everything here. Maybe later." Eris nodded, not seeming offended. "Of course. Just remember, we're not all as unfriendly as you might think. Some of us actually like humans." Mira smiled faintly. "I'll keep that in mind." As Eris walked away, Mira's thoughts drifted back to the earlier conversation with Talia, her roommate. Talia had been quiet, almost distant, ever since Mira had arrived. There was something about the way she watched Mira that made her feel like she was being judged. And yet there was an unspoken bond between them, a recognition that they were both outliers in this strange world. Later that evening, as Mira sat alone in her dorm room, she pulled out her tablet and accessed the private communication device hidden at the bottom of her bag. It was time to check in. Her mission on Earth had been clear: to prove humanity's worth in the Federation, to show that they were capable of both strength and intelligence. But now, after her first day at the Academy, Mira felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her. There was so much more at stake than just passing the physical tests. There were secrets here, hidden agendas she wasn't yet able to uncover. She needed to stay focused. She had to keep her head down and keep moving forward. The communication device lit up with a soft blue glow as Mira pressed the small button to activate it. A holographic image of a woman appeared before her stern expression unreadable. "Mira," the woman's voice crackled through the device. "Report. I've made it through my first day. I've attended my classes and passed the physical assessments. I've learned more than I expected about the other species, especially their biology. I believe I've earned some respect here." The woman on the hologram nodded. "Good, but don't forget your real mission. You are there to assess the Federation, not just study their culture. We need to know who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. Be vigilant, Mira. There's more happening at Nova Academy than meets the eye. Stay alert." Mira paused for a moment, the weight of her directive settling over her. "Understood. I'll continue with my assignments, but something feels off. There's tension here, something the others aren't telling me." The woman on the hologram frowned. "Trust your instincts, Mira. They are your most valuable asset. Keep a low profile, and don't let anyone suspect you are anything other than a normal student. If you encounter anything suspicious, report it immediately." Mira nodded, her determination stealing once again. She wasn't just at Nova Academy to learn. She was here to protect humanity's future. She would uncover whatever secrets lay hidden in this vast alien world, and she would ensure Earth's place in the galaxy, no matter what it took. The hologram flickered and vanished as Mira slipped the device back into her bag. She sat in silence for a moment, processing everything she had seen and heard today. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. No one knew what she was truly capable of, not even the Academy itself. And that was exactly how she wanted it. Tomorrow would be another test, and Mira Johnson was ready to face it head-on. The hidden agenda. The days at Nova Academy began to blur together. Mira's schedule was packed with classes, assessments, and group assignments, all of which tested her limits in ways she had never experienced before. Despite her growing confidence in her physical abilities and her quick grasp of the curriculum, Mira couldn't shake the sense that something deeper was at play. The more she learned about the other species, the more she began to see the cracks in the Federation's polished exterior. There were whispers everywhere, quiet conversations in the hallways, in classrooms, and even in the cafeteria. And Mira was starting to suspect that the whispers weren't just about her being the first human at Nova Academy. They were about something much more dangerous. It was during a late-night study session in the common room when Mira first heard something that made her blood run cold. She had been reviewing her notes from xenobiology class, trying to make sense of the information she had gathered about the Ithar species, when she noticed a figure seated at a corner table. The figure was leaning over a data tablet, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Mira couldn't see much of the being's features, but the presence felt different. The air around the figure was charged with tension. There was something about this person, or rather, this being, that sent an unsettling chill down her spine. She didn't need to be told twice. Mira had learned long ago to trust her instincts. She knew this was no coincidence. Mira quietly packed up her tablet and slid off her chair, trying to make her movements as discreet as possible. As she passed the mysterious figure, she noticed a subtle shimmer on the edges of their clothing, a marking she had seen only once before during her orientation, a symbol associated with high-ranking Federation officials. It was rare, almost too rare to be a coincidence. Before Mira could take another step, the being's voice rang out, soft yet firm. "You're curious about things that aren't meant to be known. Mira Johnson." Her heart skipped a beat. How had they known her name? Mira didn't look back. "I'm just a student, here to learn," she said calmly, trying to keep her composure. She kept walking, but every muscle in her body was on high alert. The voice, cold and measured, responded, "You're much more than that, aren't you? The human sent to infiltrate our academy, the one who thinks you can hide your true purpose from us." Mira's pulse quickened. So, they knew. The fact that the Federation had already become aware of her true mission was both relieving and terrifying. She had expected suspicion, but this was different. Whoever this was, they were no ordinary student. Mira turned to face the figure. The being was humanoid, but with an alien quality that was almost too perfect. Every movement was calculated, deliberate. Its features were symmetrical, almost artificial in appearance, and its eyes gleamed with an unsettling brilliance. "What do you want?" Mira asked, forcing herself to sound confident despite the fear growing in the pit of her stomach. The being didn't answer immediately. Instead, it stood, its long, elegant fingers tapping against the table in rhythmic intervals. It seemed to be studying her, evaluating her. Finally, it spoke again, its voice smooth but sharp. "We are not the only ones watching you, Mira. There are others, hidden in the shadows, pulling strings you cannot see. You think you're here to protect Earth, to ensure humanity's place in the galaxy. But in doing so, you've stepped into a far greater game, one that's been in motion long before you ever set foot here." Mira's mind raced. Was this person part of a larger conspiracy? Were there factions within the Federation that were already working against humanity? And if so, how deeply did this go? "I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice strained, though she tried to maintain control. "I'm just a student. I'm not involved in any games." The being smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that hinted at knowledge, at secrets Mira wasn't privy to. "You're already involved, Mira. Whether you like it or not. You're a pawn in something much bigger, a part of a plan that stretches far beyond the walls of this academy. But the question is, who will you side with when the time comes? The Federation, the ones who fear humanity's rise, or will you stand alone and risk everything?" Mira felt a knot tighten in her chest. She was no pawn. She wasn't here to play anyone's game. She had a mission, and she would complete it, no matter the cost. "I'm not here to pick sides," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I'm here to protect humanity. I don't care about the rest." The being regarded her silently for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, with a final, deliberate motion, it stood up, its movements fluid and graceful. "Very well. But remember this, Mira Johnson. In the end, it's not just about protecting Earth. It's about deciding what kind of future humanity will have in this galaxy. And trust me when I say, the choices you make here will shape that future more than you realize." The beam turned away, its figure dissolving into the shadows as it walked toward the back of the room. Mira stood frozen for a moment, her thoughts swirling. What did it mean? What was the true nature of this mission she had been sent on? She had only begun to scratch the surface, but the weight of this conversation settled on her shoulders like a boulder. The next day, Mira couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The whispers, the looks, everything felt different. As she walked to her next class, she noticed several students glancing at her, their gazes lingering just a little too long. Some of them quickly looked away when she met their eyes, but others didn't seem to care. Mira couldn't decide if it was her new reputation as the human student, or if something more sinister was afoot. That afternoon, she was invited to a study session by a group of students who had become increasingly friendly toward her. It seemed harmless at first, just a casual gathering to discuss the complexities of Federation politics and the various species within it. But as the conversation shifted to more sensitive topics, Mira felt the tension in the room grow. "I've heard rumors," one of the students, a tall, six-armed creature with translucent skin, said in a low voice. "Rumors about humans, about how you're here to represent Earth in a way no one really understands." Mira stiffened. "What kind of rumors?" The student, named Zira, leaned in closer. "Some say you're not just a student. You've been chosen for something more, something secret. We know Earth's technology is advancing rapidly, and some of the older species don't like it. There are whispers that Earth is being watched closely by certain factions in the Federation." Mira remained silent, carefully choosing her next words. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not now. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady. "I'm just here to learn." Zira's eyes gleamed, but she said nothing more. The tension in the air thickened, and Mira realized she had walked into a trap. This wasn't just a study session. This was another attempt to gauge her, to see how much she knew. As the session continued, Mira could feel the eyes of the other students on her, their questions growing more pointed, more intense. She answered as best as she could, steering the conversation away from dangerous territory. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the growing suspicion that someone in the academy was actively trying to dig into her past, and perhaps the very mission she had come here to fulfill. Later that evening, as Mira returned to her dorm, she found Talia waiting for her. Her roommate's face was unusually serious, her normally calm demeanor replaced by something more guarded. "We need to talk," Talia said quietly. "I've been hearing things about you, about Earth." Mira raised an eyebrow. "What kind of things?" Talia hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if to make sure they were alone. "There are factions at play here, Mira. Some want to see humanity rise, but others, they want to keep you in check. And I think you've caught the attention of the wrong people." Mira's heart pounded in her chest. "What do you mean? Who's behind this?" Talia gave her a long, assessing look. "I don't know. But I've been watching, and I think someone in this academy is going to make a move soon. You're not the only one who's being watched." Mira's mind raced. The conspiracy was deeper than she had realized, and the truth was becoming harder to distinguish from the lies. She had been sent to Nova Academy to prove humanity's worth, to protect Earth's future. But now, it seemed like her mission was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. She could no longer trust anyone fully, not even the people she had thought would be her allies. The stakes had just gotten higher. "Thank you, Talia," Mira said softly, her voice filled with resolve. "I think it's time we figure out what's really going on here." The tournament challenge. The days following Mira's conversation with Talia were filled with a rising sense of urgency. The tension at Nova Academy was palpable, and Mira could feel the weight of the Federation's many eyes on her. Every test, every lesson, every glance from a fellow student seemed like a carefully calculated move. It was as if there were unseen forces observing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. But Mira was no fool. She had been trained for this. She would stay focused, keep her head down, and accomplish her mission, no matter how complicated it became. Then came the announcement of the annual combat tournament, a tradition at Nova Academy, where students from every species competed in battles of strength, skill, and strategy. Mira knew this was her chance, not just to prove herself, but to uncover more about the students of the Academy, about their abilities, their alliances, and their intentions. It would be an opportunity to assess the true nature of her environment, to see which students would rise to the top and which ones might pose a threat to her mission. The tournament was a revered event, and Mira could feel the eyes of the entire Academy on her as she signed up. Her name was met with mixed reactions. Some students whispered about the human girl who had managed to survive the physical assessments, while others regarded her with suspicion, as though she didn't belong. She could feel the weight of their judgment, but it didn't bother her. She had come here for one reason: to ensure humanity's future. If this tournament would help her do that, then she would fight with everything she had. The day of the tournament arrived, and the arena was a spectacle in itself. It was a massive structure, larger than any stadium on Earth, with an arena floor that shifted and adapted to the combatants' needs. There were multiple levels, platforms that rose from the ground, and areas with various terrain features that would test every student's ability to adapt. The crowd was electric with anticipation as representatives from every species took their places in the stands, their cheers and roars filling the air. Mira stood at the edge of the arena, her heart beating with adrenaline. The other competitors, each from different worlds and species, were lined up, ready to face off. Some were taller than her, others more muscular, and still others had limbs that Mira could never have imagined before arriving at the Academy. She could feel their gazes on her, some curious, some mocking, but all expectant. They were waiting to see if the human would fail. Her first opponent was a creature from the planet Thrax, a giant, hulking beast with 4 muscular arms and skin that seemed like armor. His face was a mass of jagged ridges and sharp angles, and his yellow eyes glowed with an intensity that spoke of raw, animalistic power. Mira took her stance, watching as the Thraxian warrior grunted, flexing his massive arms, preparing for battle. The bell rang, and the fight began. At first, Mira felt the full force of her opponent's strength. The Thraxian was fast, faster than she expected, and each strike he threw was powerful enough to knock her off balance. But Mira wasn't here to play by anyone's rules. She had been trained for this moment, and she had learned to read her opponents, to predict their moves before they even made them. As the Thraxian swung a massive fist toward her, Mira dodged with a speed that surprised even herself. She moved to the side, her feet barely touching the ground as she sidestepped the attack. With a quick shift of her body, she delivered a precise kick to the Thraxian's knee, using his own momentum to send him off balance. The crowd gasped in surprise as the giant creature stumbled, but Mira didn't let up. She pressed her advantage, using her enhanced agility to dart around him, landing blows in quick succession. Her strikes were calculated, targeting his weak spots. The Thraxian roared in frustration, swinging wildly, but Mira was too fast. She ducked under his massive arms, landing a punch to his ribs that sent him crashing to the ground. The arena was silent for a moment, and then the crowd erupted in cheers. Mira stood over her fallen opponent, breathing heavily but composed. She had won, not by brute force, but by using her intelligence, speed, and precision. It was clear that the other students had underestimated her, and that was exactly how she wanted it. As she walked off the arena floor, Mira could hear the whispers of the students around her. "Did you see that? A human defeated a Thraxian that easily. Impossible. She's not like the others. She didn't let the words affect her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her victory had made her both a target and a symbol. The question now was, who would be watching her next? The semifinals. The tournament continued over the course of several days, and Mira found herself advancing through the rounds with an ease that surprised even her. Her next opponent was a being from the planet Eros, a lithe, graceful creature with 4 wings and elongated limbs. Unlike her previous opponents, this one was quick, moving with the fluidity of water, almost impossible to pin down. Mira would have to rely on her agility and mental strategy to win. The match began, and immediately, Mira could see how different this fight would be. The erosion flew high above the arena, circling like a bird of prey. Mira adjusted her stance, watching her opponent carefully. She knew that her strength wouldn't win this fight. Instead, she had to outsmart the erosion, predict where she would strike next, and use her environment to her advantage. For the first time in the tournament, Mira hesitated, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her opponent dived toward her with blinding speed, but Mira anticipated the attack, leaping to the side and using her opponent's own momentum against her. The erosion crashed into the arena floor, her wings flapping desperately to regain balance. Mira didn't waste the opportunity. She darted in, delivering a series of quick, powerful strikes that landed with precision. The erosion struggled to rise, but Mira was relentless. In one final move, she swept her opponent off her feet, sending her spinning to the ground. The arena erupted in cheers once again as Mira stood victorious. The final match. Mira's victory in the semifinals earned her a spot in the final match, where she would face the tournament's most anticipated competitor. Tyrex, a massive being with an exoskeleton and razor-sharp claws. Tyrex had been undefeated in the tournament, his strength unmatched by any other competitor. Mira knew that this match would be her greatest challenge yet. The crowd was electric as the final match began. Mira stood across from Tyrex, watching his every movement. His hulking form towered over her, but Mira was undaunted. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to let the size or strength of her opponent intimidate her. Tyrex lunged first, his claws flashing toward Mira's chest. But she was faster. She ducked, rolling to the side, and narrowly avoiding the deadly swipe. Tyrex turned quickly, his movements a blur, and Mira barely had time to react as he charged again. This time, she jumped into the air, using her enhanced strength to propel herself higher than she ever could have managed as a normal human. Tyrex's claws slashed through the air where she had just been, and Mira used the opening to deliver a powerful kick to his side, sending him crashing to the ground. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen Tyrex fall before. Tyrex was stunned but quickly recovered, his massive body rolling to its feet. He bared his fangs, and Mira could see the fury in his eyes. This was no longer just a competition. It was personal. The fight continued, each blow between them sending shockwaves through the arena. Mira used every ounce of her enhanced speed and strength, dodging and countering with precision. But Tyrex was relentless, his claws cutting through the air, and Mira could feel herself growing tired. She knew she had to finish the fight soon. Finally, in one split-second moment, Mira saw an opening. Tyrex lunged at her again, but this time, Mira was ready. She used his momentum against him, spinning around his massive form and flipping him onto his back with a maneuver so fast and fluid that the crowd barely had time to react. Tyrex let out a roar of pain as Mira pinned him to the ground, her knee pressing into his chest. "Do you yield?" she asked, her voice steady, her heart racing. Tyrex's eyes glowed with fury, but after a long pause, he finally nodded. "I yield." The arena erupted in cheers, and Mira stood up, breathing heavily. She had won. The final match had tested every limit of her abilities, but in the end, she had triumphed. And now, the Academy knew that the human student was more than just a curiosity. She was a force to be reckoned with. But as the applause died down and Mira walked off the arena floor, She couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. There were far more dangerous games being played behind the scenes, and she had just taken her first step into a much larger, darker world. The truth behind the tournament. The celebrations following Mira's victory in the tournament were brief. Though she had become the center of attention at Nova Academy, basking in the applause of her peers and the admiration of the faculty, Mira couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something far more important at stake. Her victory was more than just a personal achievement. It had elevated her status at the academy, but it also made her an even more obvious target. As Mira passed through the crowds, she saw students whispering, some with admiration, others with distrust. To many, she had just confirmed the rumors. The human was no longer someone to be ignored. But to Mira, it felt like a fragile victory. There were shadows lurking behind every victory and every triumph. In the days following the tournament, Mira's routine at Nova Academy continued, but now there was a new weight to her every move. The faculty seemed more inclined to watch her, to analyze her, and many of the students who had previously kept their distance now approached her with a mix of curiosity and caution. Mira wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or apprehensive. The tournament had given her a sense of belonging in the academy, but it had also drawn the attention of more dangerous players. One evening, after a long day of classes, Mira found herself wandering through the halls of Nova Academy in search of some peace. The academy was vast, its architecture a blend of ancient alien design and modern, cutting-edge technology. She often found herself drawn to the quiet spaces, the hallways that seemed to hum with an almost meditative energy, where the walls were covered in strange, luminous rooms that told the stories of countless worlds. It was in one of these secluded corners that Mira ran into Nix. Mira had seen Nix before, a mysterious student whose dark eyes seemed to hide secrets. Nix was known for being quiet, observant, and always just a little out of place, like she wasn't fully part of the academy, or perhaps she had an agenda that went beyond her studies. She was humanoid, but her dark skin was flecked with tiny glowing patterns that pulsed with energy, and her long black hair flowed like liquid night. Walking alone again. Nix's voice was soft, but had an edge to it, as though she knew Mira's every thought. Mira hesitated but nodded, not wanting to reveal too much, just needed some space. Nix regarded her for a moment before speaking again. "You've become quite the spectacle. Some of the students are impressed, others are worried. They're starting to ask questions." Mira looked around cautiously, making sure no one was listening. "What kind of questions?" Nix leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You've been watched, Mira. Not just by your classmates, but by certain faculty members as well. There are those who see your success as a threat, and there are others who view you as an asset." Mira's heart quickened. She had known that she was being observed, but hearing it from Nix's lips made it all the more real. "Who is watching me?" Nix's eyes narrowed. "I don't know all the details, but I've seen enough to know that there are factions within the Federation who don't trust Earth. Some are afraid of humanity's rise, and some want to see you fail. Your victory in the tournament has drawn their attention." Mira felt a cold chill run down her spine. "And what do you want from me?" Nix smiled slightly, her eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and mystery. "Nothing from you, Mira. At least not yet. But you're in deeper than you think. I just thought you should know. There are people here who want to use you, and others who want to destroy you. The question is, which side are you going to choose?" Before Mira could respond, Nix turned and disappeared into the shadows of the academy, leaving her with more questions than answers. Mira stood there, trying to process everything Nix had said. It wasn't just the students of the academy who were watching her. It was the powerful factions within the Federation. The stakes had just become far higher than she had anticipated. A conversation with Administrator Zorik. The next morning, Mira found herself summoned to Administrator Zorik's office. The towering alien's gold-tinted skin gleamed in the soft light of his office, a room filled with holographic maps of distant star systems and intricate designs that Mira had come to associate with the Federation's deep knowledge of the galaxy. Zorik was a being of stature and influence, his reputation across the Academy one of respect and authority. And now, Mira was about to face him again. As she entered, the door shut silently behind her. Zorik's eyes scanned her with their piercing, golden intensity, and Mira could feel his gaze weighing her every movement. "Ms. Johnson," Zorik began, his voice low and controlled. "Your performance in the tournament was impressive. You've exceeded expectations, not just as a student, but as a representative of Earth. Many here believe that your success is a sign of great potential for your species." Mira stood tall, keeping her posture straight and her voice steady. "Thank you, Administrator Zorik. I've only been doing what's expected of me." Zorik studied her for a long moment. "Yes, but there are others who believe that your success could be dangerous. Some feel that humanity's potential could be a threat to the balance of power within the Federation. As you can imagine, not everyone is pleased with your rise." Mira's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain composed. "I didn't come here to disrupt anything. I came to prove that Earth deserves its place in the galaxy." Zorik leaned back in his chair, his four eyes narrowing slightly. "And prove it, you have. But you must understand, Mira, that the Federation is a complex and delicate entity. Many species have spent centuries building alliances and power structures. Humanity's sudden rise threatens that equilibrium. Your success may be seen as a challenge to those who fear change." Mira clenched her fists at her sides, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I'm not a threat. I'm just one person. But I represent billions back on Earth who are trying to find their place in this galaxy. We're not looking to conquer anyone. We just want to be treated as equals." Zorik's gaze softened ever so slightly, but there was a shadow of something unreadable in his eyes. "I understand your intentions, Mira. But the truth is, you're already a part of something much bigger. The question now is, will you be a tool for peace, or will you become a symbol of rebellion?" Mira swallowed hard, the weight of Zorik's words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had always known that her mission was about more than just proving humanity's worth. It was about ensuring that Earth wasn't pushed aside in the growing tensions of the Federation. But now, the realization hit her with a force she wasn't prepared for. The Federation's delicate balance wasn't just political, it was personal. There were individuals here who would do anything to ensure that humanity stayed on the sidelines, that Earth remained a second-class citizen. "You're asking me to choose a side," Mira said softly, her voice low but firm. Zorik's gaze never wavered. "I'm not asking you to choose, Mira. The choices have already been made for you. But you will have to decide what kind of future you want. The Federation will be watching, and so will your fellow students. What happens next is in your hands." With that, Zorik stood, signaling that their conversation was over. "Return to your studies, Ms. Johnson. We will continue to monitor your progress. Your place here is still uncertain, but I am watching you closely." Mira nodded, her thoughts swirling with the weight of Zorik's words. As she left his office, she realized that everything had just become far more complicated than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making a choice that could shape the future of her entire species. A new ally. Later that evening, Mira met with Talia in their shared dorm room. Her roommate, usually so composed and quiet, seemed more agitated than usual. Talia was pacing back and forth, her silver eyes flickering with unease. "I spoke to someone today," Talia confessed, her voice low. "Someone who's been watching you. I think they know what you're really here for, Mira." Mira's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" Talia hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Nix. She knows something. She's not just a student. There's more to her, and I think she's been following you for a reason." Mira frowned. "What did she say?" Talia stopped pacing and turned to face Mira, her expression serious. She said you can't trust anyone here, but she also said she might be able to help. She knows more about the factions that are targeting you and Earth. Mira's mind raced. She had already suspected that Nyx was more than she seemed, but now she had confirmation. She needed to find out more. Where can I meet her? Talia sighed. She's waiting for you in the garden dome. She's been there all evening, watching. I don't trust her, but I think you might need to talk to her. Mira nodded, her decision already made. There were too many secrets swirling around Nova Academy, and Nyx might be the only person who could help her unravel them. The game was changing, and Mira was ready to play her part.